We're now ready for our next panel discussion, Compliance AI. How far can we go? The panel consists of Christian Hunt, founder and CEO of Human Risk, Anne Vogt, head of compliance and data protection at FreeNow, François Enic, partner at KPMG Law, and Sandrine Richard, an expert in business ethics, corporate security, and economic intelligence. Please put your hands together for the speakers.
Hello and welcome to this panel. We've had some fascinating presentations on AI, and so we want to continue that discussion. So with me, I have some experts here. Anna has kindly, as we said, joined us in this session as well. And so I thought we ought to start off, François and Sandrine, and really pick up some of the themes that Anna has talked about. What was it that struck you, particularly in her presentation, things that we've heard before that you think we should focus on? François?
Well, of course, the nice lamb was very impressive, but I fully agree with a lot of your statements, especially that it's highly important to get a cross-divisional understanding of AI, and that a lot of divisions are involved. Furthermore, that there are a lot of risks associated with it which are not very apparent. I think that was very convincing.
And Sandrine?
Yes, I fully agree with your presentation also, but I think if I have to add something, it's how to use AI. I think the key for the compliance officer or for all the firm, it's how to use and how to use well. And I think this is the key after to implement correctly AI.
Excellent, thank you. And it occurs to me that if we're going to have a panel talking about AI, that it's great having some humans here, but we should probably invite some AI in. So I took the liberty of asking a special guest to join us virtually on stage, a little bit shy, but this guest is, well, let's have a look at something I asked this guest earlier on, a short video piece that's going to helpfully give us some insights as to what the AI thinks that we should be talking about. And the question that I asked our friendly piece of AI was the fact that I was going to be hosting a panel. Here we can see up on the screen, this is ChatGPT-4 that we have here with us. And I thought it'd be helpful to ask a very, very simple question. Notice at the bottom, if you've not seen this before, hello, ChatGPT, I said. Today I'm hosting a panel at ECEC, Europe's largest ethics and compliance conference. The topic we're discussing is the impact of AI on compliance. What question should I ask the panel? No need to give a rationale, just the question is fine. Also, can I do you the honor of calling you Chat ECEC just for today? And the response that you will see in a second is, hello, I'm honored to be called Chat ECEC for today. Question for your panel. How can organizations ensure that their use of AI in compliance management adheres to evolving ethical standards and regulatory frameworks across different jurisdictions? So obviously, I've chosen some clever prompts there to make sure it didn't give us too much information, and also that it was honored to be called Chat ECEC. So with that in mind, I think the key thing that Chat ECEC thought we should focus on are pretty obvious: the ethical standards and the regulatory framework. So I thought, Anna, perhaps we can start with you. I think the ethical subject, we've talked a lot about compliance. What do you think about the ethical side of AI? You touched on it in your presentation.
Yeah, I think we always talk about compliance, but the ethical side goes beyond that. And a lot of people also always ask me about data protection, but again, ethics goes much far beyond this, because there are a lot of benefits to AI, but of course you have really the problem of it can be biased. It can do things that, and not to say that humans are not biased, right? So because that's one of the things, but it produces the input that it's given. So for me, the ethical concerns are much more concerning in terms of you can falsify identities, you can impersonate someone. How far can we go with this? Like, how far should we let it go? So for me, this is one of the biggest concerns that I actually have. What can we allow it to do? Or how far should we go?
And François, let's pick up that second subject that Chat ECEC thought we should cover, which is the idea of regulation. Talk to us a little bit about the landscape at the moment and where you see it going.
Well, I think it's a very, very interesting question. I think that's a major question at least for us lawyers. The regulation is upcoming. In the AI Act, I think everybody has heard of it. It is complemented by the liability regime for AI tools. But you cannot only focus, I think, Anne, you also mentioned it, you cannot only focus on one piece of legislation. All the surrounding other parts, the Data Act, the GDPR, and other international standards, authorities, it's all important to adhere. And I think the major question is, or the big problem within AI compliance is sometimes it's still, at least for us lawyers, it's kind of like a black box, and you need to understand where's the data coming from, what is the algorithm doing, and only then you are able to comply, or to know how to comply with all the regulatory frameworks.
And since I have you as a lawyer on the panel, I thought it might be helpful to explore the knowledge that the legal system has about it. I mean, one of the challenges we're all learning here, and I wondered what are your thoughts in terms of, do lawyers and those legislating have the appropriate skills to be able to make these determinations? I mean, it's new for all of us. How can you possibly write rules for something that we don't necessarily fully understand?
Very good. Yeah. Well, but Anna mentioned it also. You need the input from the technical expert, from the data experts, the data analysts. And only then the lawyers might be able to at least apply rules which are not completely out of the picture. And I must say, the EU has actually made a quite good piece of regulation. Still, of course, it's very complex. A lot of different mindsets were colliding. But in the end, I think we as lawyers can be kind of proud that we have been involved in it.
And Anna and Sandrine, any thoughts on that?
No, I think, yes, you need to have the vision and the expertise of, for example, data scientists. But if I can give an example like a toolkit, everybody say we need to fight against corruption, we need to implement ISO, for example, now it's EA. And when I talk with firms, they said, okay, it's great, Sandrine, you were a lawyer, now you are an expert, but how can we do to implement, And so I wonder in myself, and I say, okay, try to be just like a children and just think simply, And I remember when we start to fight against corruption, we start with risk mapping. And I think for EA, this is exactly the same. I'm sorry, I don't have PowerPoint, but you can find like categorization of risk in EA, and you make a risk mapping, and you will see the criteria. And after, like for corruption, it's step by step. But first of all, you need to understand what is EA, what is the rule. We have already a legal framework in French, in Europe, in US it's something different. But so I think it's really important to have a risk mapping to see what is the different kind of EA. To fight against cyber attacks, for example.
And Anna, I'm struck that you work for a tech company that's developing a platform. And so I think this is relevant for all businesses. But at yours, I can imagine the potential for it being used in interesting ways within the business is clearly there. And so I think you've probably got a really good sense of where this might go in future. I mean, presumably this is not just something you're having to think about. You can see your business is using this, and therefore you've got to think, one, how does it impact your function, but also thinking about how you can keep a handle on what the business is doing.
Yeah, to be honest, for me, I think it's even more important to keep a handle on what the business is doing, and depends again on the type of business, of course. But you said I work for a tech company, and especially in the tech context, it's not only deploying AI, it's really might come to a point where developing AI. So going back to the lawyers, I think the lawyers, sorry, I have to do this. I'm a lawyer by training.
I think I'm the only non-lawyer here, so you feel free to have a crack. If you don't, I will.
Yeah, okay, no, but I'm really good at this, also to take a crack on it. So I think lawyers are super important in this, but again, going back to, you need more people involved. The lawyers are only one component. Often lawyers in the past, they can read the law, but in this case, it's not only about regulations. I said this before, it's really about understanding. So you really have to, especially in a tech company, you really have to work with the tech people to understand not only what is the regulations, but what do they want to do and why do they want to do it. Really collaborate on this and really show interest. For me, I think, the important part is, and that's why I spend so much time, and of course for me in the business, it's not only hypothetical. It's really a practical issue to face. But since I showed interest, and they can explain to you so many things, like they showed me how to trick AI, so not in our context, but in general. So you really have to be able to talk beyond the law and really go into the practicals. And that's, I think, the really difficult part. And regarding the risks, you can map the risk, and I totally agree. But for instance, one thing I asked myself the other day, so how does AI react in a situation that is crisis or a risk that you couldn't think about before? Because we input the data, we train it on certain on certain use cases, but there are always things, and especially now how the world is currently in the state it is, you were not able to foresee. And then going back to the ethical question, how is it going to decide? Am I going to, there are tests with this, what am I going to do? The one harm or the other harm, and how is it going to decide?
And of course, there's an interesting point here that humans aren't perfect. We know that. And so one of the challenges that we've got is that the data sets that are going into AI is obviously human-generated data. And so we're bringing the biases of the past into what we're doing, and sort of thinking ahead to what might happen in the world is sometimes beyond us as people. And I wondered, therefore, Francois, as we think about the sort of frameworks that either we put in place within firms or the legal system, we've got to really be thinking possibly in ways that are uncomfortable for us as humans. We've got to think the unthinkable here, particularly given the scale of what AI can do. This is, if it goes wrong, it can go wrong on a very big scale. How can we start to think about that?
I think we touched that point already. I think there are a lot of very important things, but in the end, we need to try to get kind of a transparency. Which data are we using? How we are using the data? What are we going to do with the AI? What can happen? And for this, again, I, from a legal point of view, can only try to explain what the requirements are, but I do not have the knowledge to understand. So there needs to be kind of an understanding between the different divisions to at least be aware of how is it functioning, what can happen, and how to tackle all these challenges. And I think, Anna, you also mentioned it already, I think AI compliance or handling the risk associated with AI goes beyond the typical only one regulation. You need to think in a broader context. And that I think that is what you are stressing, makes it so complicated, because you have to think beyond the written framework, and you have to be very creative on what can happen, how a bias can influence the outcome of an AI, how the AI maybe trains itself or maybe makes a decision which was not intended to do. So I think that's going to be a big challenge, and we need to be creative.
And something we're sort of, it's interesting because whenever we talk about the opportunities, we also immediately start jumping to the risks. But let's go back to some of the sort of positives. If we look at what this can do, is there anything that particularly excites you or you're finding interesting?
Yes, of course. I think first of all, a lot of things to say, but first of all, the role of compliance officer will change. We will improve efficiency. For example, you can have freeing hub for compliance professional to focus on high-level strategic work. You know what I mean? Second, you can have identify patterns and anomaly. A lot of issue with fraud, for example. I will insist about detection, fraud detection. It's very important with EA. I know I need to be positive, but you will reduce the risk of human error. Of course, it's always, the check and balances between human and EA, because EA is a system, But really you can really reduce the risk of fraud because it's not subjective. And it will be very objective. You can also enhance decision making. For example, AI can provide organization with real time to think about something very important. They can also have real time insight to data and information. And you will be focused not on the detail. Of course, we will not have time to enter in the detail what is EA and how it works. But we have also a lot of positive thing and discrimination. You know, EA, I know some people say, yes, but it's a risk also. Of course, it's a risk. It's always like the mirror. You have positive and negative. And for discrimination with EA, you can implement some system of EA to fight against discrimination. So for me, it's really interesting to have another role for the compliance officer, and maybe it will be like a supervisor, like advisory, and he will focus on the main issue and not on the detail, and reducing, of course, the human error.
So I think that's simultaneously very exciting, right? Because what it means is we have the capability to look at a lot more things, but equally it's going to require, based on what you're saying, is what compliance is there to do is going to change, and that will therefore require, I think, a shift in people's skill sets. And I'm struck when we think about the future potential, and you know, back to your business, the opportunities this offers are fairly broad. And I'm struck very much by this, back to the sort of ethics theme of just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yeah. How do we start to get a handle on that? Because when we look at, we go back to social media, we look at things that were, you know, probably predictable but weren't envisaged by the people that were putting it in place. And so one of the challenges that we've got is because we don't know what this can do, it's also an opportunity. So we, on the one hand, want to use it to deliver outcomes that are not possible at the moment. On the other hand, we've got to keep a constraint on it. How do you, in your business, sort of start thinking about keeping an eye on what they're up to and simultaneously encouraging creativity in business development whilst also thinking, well, where might this go?
I think it's really important, again, back to we really have to work in collaboration with a lot of departments, especially also with the departments that actually want to use the tools. And not only the ones using, but also developing or inputting the data. And really making, not going, again, being a police officer, say you cannot do this, or there might be those risks, but work as a team together and see what could be the potential things that could happen, like really brainstorming on all the things that we might never have thought about. And bring the awareness to those teams to ping it with you before they want to do something with it. Really just coming up and saying, hey, this would be a great opportunity, but I think there might be something to it. This might actually be doing this. So, and this is when you think as a compliance officer, yeah, now we are talking, because now we are actually discussing together the kind of things that could happen, and not disregarding the opportunity, right? Because to your point, there are huge potentials to it, but you really, I can't think of all the things that it can do. I have a really creative mind in terms of risks, but not that much. So, and also because I don't have, sometimes I lack the technical part. So we need to work as a team to be able to see the opportunity and think, how can we embrace this opportunity, but also thinking about all the risks. And you can't do this alone. And I think sometimes, going back to the lawyers, sorry, when you look at it from outside, it looks and it sounds probably easier than it really is when you're inside, because there are so many things that you can't think about. And some things are not implementable, where you can say, yeah, it's easy to do a risk analysis. Yeah, but, oh, well, okay, no, it's not that easy when you actually have to do it. So, yeah, back to your question, really, you need to find a way to bring this awareness, but in a way that actually makes people want to talk to you and see, can we look at it together?
And I guess, Francois, when we think about the legislative environment, I mean, you know, I was really struck by Anna's picture of her daughter, because actually, yeah, what we're all learning here, in many respects, we're all children when it comes to this technology, and we're having to learn how to speak to it, work out how to engage it. What does it mean in our lives? Where might it go? And so there is an element, I think, of play with this and seeing what happens. and almost experimentation. Now, that's fine for something that doesn't have widespread implications. Because of the nature of how this might spread, I could see a risk of a legislative regime either coming down on almost preventing the best bits coming out, so overly harsh, or alternatively allowing massive loopholes that haven't been thought through. Any thoughts on how both either legislators could manage that or how one can think about that internally? Because it strikes me that in many respects, a traditional approach to legislation or regulation might not work with this particular dynamic just because of the risks and the scale of this.
I agree with your perception that the typical regulatory framework is almost not capable of tackling all risks because we cannot foresee the risks. But that also makes it so complicated for us on the company side to implement rules and systems to comply with sometimes very unspecific, sometimes very specific laws, which are, but in the reality, almost not possible to implement. So I think there is no solution for such a situation at the moment. What I want to maybe emphasize on the upcoming AI Act, a good element is that it's kind of a risk-based approach, which allows at least the companies or the user of AI to take a relevant role to assess the risk by itself. Does it not try to tackle all risk by a legislative piece? And however, another element, I think, to really tackle all the upcoming digital laws and to be not too restricted, not too focused on risks. One element I think is really useful is to emphasize the digital ethics aspect, to rather ask the question, how do I want to be seen in the market as a digital company, as a provider of a very interesting tech and AI solutions? How do I want to be seen regarding trusts and that I'm the good guy, that I'm not doing harm with your data or with my tools, but that I'm responsible for all these, maybe not all foreseeable risks.
Sandrine or Anna, any thoughts on how we can think about this challenge?
Happy.
No, it's okay.
So I think especially it was always important. Stakeholder involvement in policymaking was always important, but I think especially for this type of legislation, you really have to. It's really important to involve all stakeholders. So not only the legal persons, but also civil society, the businesses, and really get the input to see what do people want, what do the businesses need, and I think at least with the AI Act, it seems that we're going that route. We're really trying to involve the different stakeholders to understand how is it going to impact the different parts. And this will be more and more important in the future because you cannot just rely on the legal persons, but also not on the businesses because they're going to tell you, we can't have any of this. So it's really important to have this interplay between different stakeholders.
And I think it also requires all of us to try to understand each other, that me as a lawyer tries to, not because I'm lacking the technical capabilities, but also understand the reasoning and the background from the data analytics, from the tech guys, and also vice versa, that the data analytics people try to understand my background and why I try to implement a rule which is maybe not possible.
But that's a really good point. And I think if someone had told me 4 or 5 years ago that I would be looking that much into AI and work in a tech company, I would probably have said, yeah, sure. But nowadays it's something that I'm doing far beyond my role. I'm studying this. I want to do this because this is extremely interesting, also for a legal person. And I think it makes us wanting to become more involved in other parts. So sometimes we lived in silos, and especially legal and compliance teams lived a little bit in a silo. We are in the ivory tower, and then the rest is down there. And this, I think we will be able to, hopefully we will be able to break it with this and become more part of the organization.
And it really struck me as you were talking that absolutely, often the perception around the compliance function is, well, they're there to make sure we're compliant, and I'm going to do whatever it is my job is, and I'll hand that over to them. I think what we're hearing here is that actually we don't have, I'm not sure compliance has ever had the answers to everything by default, but in this particular case, there's no way a compliance function can have that. And so this is, as you say, is a great way, I think, of pushing things into a more collaborative model where it isn't sort of, compliance is sort of has all the answers. Actually, we need the business to be thinking for itself as well.
Yeah, and I love the fact that there are a lot of people out there. I am an AI expert. I'm not for sure. And I don't think, right now, no one is an AI expert, right? You can know a lot of AI and understand a lot, but I really would be cautious in calling anyone a total AI expert. So we're all learning together and we can learn from each other. So I think it's really important that we do it together.
And look, I think one of the key questions that I know people are asking is, well, how do we even get started with this? And we started to have some ideas, but I think let's get into the sort of how do we solve this problem so people can take away some practical tips. Sandrine, any thoughts? I mean, you talked about mapping the risks. You talked a little bit about the cyber thing. What's your sort of start point for how can people start to get a handle on this?
Okay, I think, sorry, because I was a lawyer, so it's a little bit boring, but first step, it's the definition. And I think you can start, Anna, you said that it's very important and it's very interesting to communicate between different divisions, legal division, but not just legal division, marketing also, and in the firm, what is EA? What is the definition of EA in your own firm? Not in general, because it's not the same. If you take a dictionary, you will find a general definition. But to implement, it's like ethics. Every company can have a different way to apply ethics. So for me, the first step is to define, and why not? I already make it for some firm to elaborate, not like guidelines, but yes, it's a kind of guideline with what kind of ethics, what kind of EA, and the EA by design, you can start like this, and after you will sensibilize your employee, because it's very important for everybody to know what about you talk about what exactly, so, and after you can start like this. Of course, for me it's very important, and the key is to sensibilize and to say what's going on, what we can do, what EA can be very useful for compliance officer, but not just for compliance officer, to talk with, for example, financial, And after this first step, you can also make a risk mapping, because your own firm. You need to have a global vision. You cannot just think about your own division. You need to know your firm. You need to know what we will do, what is your good point, your advantage, your pain also, and after you need to implement and to define EA with transparency. It's very important. If you have a lack of transparency, you will have biases, of course, and you will have a lot of issue and not a good data. If you don't have a good data, you will have a very big issue after, So you need to anticipate with good tools. If I have time, I have a list of tools you can find on the website of CNIL in France. But I list some good tools, like, for example, you need to define a purpose in your firm. You need to establishing a legal base, compiling a database, because database is very important just to achieve your goal with transparency. You need to minimizing data. I have a lot of, for example, assessing the system. It's very important. And if you implement all these tools, first of all, I think it could be very useful for your firm, because you will have something real. It's not just superficial, and you can start like this.
And it struck me as you were talking, and obviously we don't have to look too far for AI. Everybody's talking about AI. It's a sort of, and it almost feels negligent, to use a legal term, not to, if you're not trying to use AI somehow, you're not kind of with the program, you're not moving forward. So it seems to me that there's almost a sort of social incentive on people to be thinking in those terms. It's exciting, it's interesting, might make my job much more fascinating. On the other hand, could do me out of a job if I'm not too careful. So we're all sort of grappling with that. But the places in which AI could find itself within the organization seem to me to be very, very broad based on what you were saying, Sandrine. And so, we've talked about chat, ECEC, that's an obvious interface that we have, but there are lots of other bits of software, lots of things that AI can get involved with. And how do we start to get a handle on where AI might be being used? Because what you and I might recognize as AI, a sort of generative AI model like chat, ECEC, it can manifest as lots, and we're seeing lots of bit of software sort of bringing AI in without us necessarily realizing it. So how do we even start defining what it is, to Sandrine's point?
Yeah, so I would go really back to the basics, and I did that. I started with a children's book. It's my bag, I forgot to bring it. But really trying to understand, I did a bunch of courses, and so of course my learning budget is also not immense. But there is a lot of things out there that you can actually try to, if you are interested, try to get a handle on it and really start understanding, really going from the basics. What is AI? What different types of AI are there? To be honest, the children's book was great, really, because it helped me a lot. And then really trying to educate yourself to get to that point where you can be able to help your organization, because I think you really need to get started. But you need to get started somehow. For instance, start learning how to prompt. There are either the course and how can you prompt and how can you use visuals and because I wanted to understand where other departments would try to maybe use this kind of things. So really, I went out there and did 15 minutes trainings, started listening to podcasts to understand in the US, what are they doing? They're far more advanced in some certain aspects. So really trying to educate myself so that I will be able to understand the different situations and use cases where it can be used.
And Francois, any thoughts from your side about how to tackle that?
I agree with you. What was very helpful for me was talking to my colleagues with the data analytics, with the cyber colleagues, with the business people, to get their view on AI, to get their visions of AI, how they want to use it or what they have ideas with it. That really helps to get a broader picture, and I think that's essential for understanding AI, understanding the possibilities and also the risks, and how to be compliant with not only the laws, but being compliant with AI.
And I want to sort of, let's get down to the practical. If there was one tip that you could give people in terms of getting their hands around, so the people watching this now, Sandrine, what would your top tip for people be?
It's a hard question.
Let's come back to you. We'll get Anna. What's your thought?
Yeah. Try, experiment. Don't put any sensitive data into this thing. Really, now comes the lawyer out. But a lawyer and also the concerned person, really. But experiment. I have to confess, I'm not sure if my husband is watching this, but he was my guinea pig. And he and my neighbor, actually, so they were playing around with this. So I observed what they were doing, and in order to be able then to use it in my day-to-day. So really observe, try, experiment, but also always with a critical view. Like always trying to think, okay, does this make sense or not?
Francois, top tip?
Talking for a lawyer, talking to the technical experts. That's very, very eye-opening.
Sandrine, any thoughts?
Yes, but it's complicated because it's sum up. You need to communicate, you need to learn, you need to try, you need to... Yes, I think try to understand with expert. Really, for me, it's very important. With the engineering, someone who can explain what is it.
Yeah, but to your point, I always ask the technical teams, explain this to me as if I'm, an idiot, really. So in 101, AI 101, really because I couldn't understand, at some point I couldn't understand what they were saying, so I really asked them, explain it to me as you explain a child, because you saw the picture, I have a child, someday I have to be able to explain it to her, so I want to understand it in a way that I can actually understand it. So admit when you don't, and you you mentioned that you talk to the technical. This is not my language, so I need someone to translate this for me so that I can actually...
That's why I said you need to be like a children. When I talk, when I learn EA, I'm like a children because I need to learn before to understand after the technical expert. But I need to have the legal from the theoretical to say, okay, this is EA. And after I try to talk with the engineering and say, okay, now I can understand, and after I will be able to explain to my team what is it, and of course, what is your ethics? I don't know, but you work in the company, and again, each company has a view of ethics is not the same, you know, and I think EA, it's really the same way of doing.
Amazing. Well, it wouldn't be a panel on AI without giving the final words to, well, the thing that best understands AI, which is, of course, Chat ECEC. So I thought as part of my prep for this, I thought I would ask Chat ECEC to send you all out into the world with a piece of advice so we can pull up the video of the advice that it gave me and share with you what it says. So thanks, Chat ECEC. I said, we've come to the end of the panel. I'd like to give the last word to you. What simple piece of advice would you give to people on this subject? Thank you for the honor. Chat ECEC is delighted to contribute. Final piece of advice: embrace AI as a tool to enhance, not replace, human oversight and compliance. Ensure transparent, ethical, and accountable AI use by continuously engaging in dialogue with stakeholders, prioritizing education on AI technologies, and being proactive in aligning AI systems with evolving and ethical and legal standards. So I think a very wholesome answer there. I would like to say thank you to Chat ECEC for its contribution, and particular thanks to my panelists here. Over to you, Tanya.